They didn't bring it up right away. We had dinner first. We talked about normal things. The kids, the weather, business, everything felt too normal. Then my son reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. He didn't look at me when he slid it across the table. "Just sign this, Mom." That's all he said. No explanation, no context. I looked down. Multiple pages, already filled out. Sticky tabs marking where I needed to sign. Not where to read, where to sign. I was still holding my coffee. Still sitting at the head of my own table. In the house I paid for. With money I earned. And suddenly, no one was talking. They were watching me, quiet, patient, like this had already been decided. Like my part in all of it was just a formality. That's when I felt it. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition, because I've spent my whole life in business. And I know exactly what it looks like when a deal is already done. And the only thing missing is your signature. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about helping me. This was about control, and they thought I wouldn't see it coming.
Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
I didn't answer right away. I picked up the papers slowly. Not to read them, just to feel them. Thick, official, prepared. This wasn't something they printed 5 minutes ago. This had been planned. I set my coffee down. Carefully. "I'll take a look," I said. My voice sounded normal, even to me. My daughter-in-law smiled. Too quickly. "Oh, it's nothing complicated," she said. "We just want to make things easier for you." Easier. I've heard that word before. Usually right before someone tries to take something that isn't theirs. I turned the first page. Legal language. Dense. Clean. But I didn't read every line. I didn't need to. I know structure. I know intent. I know when control is being transferred quietly. "Why now?" I asked. My son finally looked at me. "It's just planning ahead," he said. Planning? Ahead of what? I leaned back in my chair. Looked at both of them. Really looked. They weren't nervous. That's what stayed with me. No hesitation. No guilt. Just expectation. Like I was late to something they had already agreed on. "You've been busy," I said. My son gave a small shrug. "We've been talking to people." Of course they had. Lawyers don't write documents like this without direction. Without instruction. Without a goal. "And what exactly does this do?" I asked. My daughter-in-law answered this time. "It just streamlines things. Puts everything under one structure. So you don't have to deal with the stress." Stress. I built everything they were sitting in. Every property. Every account. Every dollar. I didn't look away. "I'm not stressed," I said. She laughed lightly. "Well, not now. But later, you know, things happen." Things happen. That's a very convenient phrase. It covers everything. Age, illness, mistakes, excuses. I turned another page. There it was. Control. Not shared. Not supervised. Transferred. Cleanly. Quietly. To my son. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Something colder. Clarity. "I see," I said. And I did. Every conversation from the past year started lining up in my head. The questions, the suggestions, the little comments. "You should simplify things. You don't need to handle everything anymore. We're just trying to help." I thought they cared. I thought they were concerned. I was wrong. They were preparing me, conditioning the idea, so this moment would feel natural. Expected. I closed the folder. Gently. "I didn't realize this was urgent," I said. My son leaned forward slightly. "It's not urgent," he said. "It's just smart." Smart for who? I watched his face. The same boy who used to wait for me by the door when I came home. The same boy who once asked me if I would always take care of him. I did. For decades. And now, he was asking me to hand him everything. Without question. Without discussion. Without respect. "I'll need some time," I said. Silence. Not surprise. Disappointment. That was interesting. They expected me to sign tonight. At my own table. After dinner. Like it was just another bill. Another form. Another small thing. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms lightly. "It's really standard," she said. Standard. There's nothing standard about giving up control of everything you built. I stood up. Slowly. "I don't sign anything I don't review properly," I said. My voice stayed calm. Steady. Controlled. The way it always has been. In business. In negotiations. In moments that matter. My son sighed, not loudly, just enough. Mom, you're overthinking this. No, I wasn't. That was the problem. I was finally thinking clearly. And for the first time that evening, I stopped seeing them as my children, and started seeing them as people who had already decided what should belong to them. And that changed everything. I didn't walk them to the door. I never do. People who come into my house know how to leave. They stood there for a second, waiting, maybe for me to change my mind. Maybe for me to say, "Oh, don't worry, I'll sign it tomorrow." I didn't. My son picked up his keys. "We should go," he said, not looking at me. Of course not. My daughter-in-law gathered her bag. Still composed, still polite. That's her strength. She never pushes hard. She just keeps moving things quietly until they end up where she wants them. "Just don't wait too long," she said. "These things are better handled early." Early. Another word that sounds harmless, but isn't. "I'll let you know," I replied. No emotion, no warmth, just information. They nodded, and then they left. The door closed, and the house went quiet. The kind of quiet you only notice when something has changed. I stood there for a moment, still, listening, not to them, to myself, to what I was feeling. And the answer surprised me. I wasn't hurt. That came later. What I felt first was insult, not loud, not sharp, just deep, because they didn't even try to hide it. They didn't try to convince me, didn't explain, didn't respect the process. They assumed access, assumed agreement, assumed control. I walked back to the table. The chair was still slightly pulled out. My coffee had gone cold. I sat down again, looked at the papers, didn't open them this time, just rested my hand on top. And I started remembering, not tonight, everything before tonight, the small things, the details people usually ignore. That's where truth lives, not in big moments, in patterns. A year ago, my son started asking about accounts. Casual questions. "Do you still manage everything yourself?" At the time, I smiled. "Of course I do." He nodded like that answer made him think. 6 months ago, my daughter-in-law mentioned estate planning. "We should probably organize things," she said. "Just in case. Just in case." I agreed it was smart. Because it is. But I didn't realize she already had a plan. 3 months ago, they asked for copies of documents, insurance, property titles, just to have everything in one place. I gave them some, not everything. I don't give everything, never have. That's why I still have what I built. 2 months ago, they started using a new tone. Softer, slower, like they were talking to someone older than I am. "You shouldn't stress yourself. You've done enough. You deserve to rest." Rest. That word again. People offer you rest when they want you out of the way. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes for a moment, and everything aligned. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a conversation. This was a process, carefully built, step by step. And tonight was just the final move. The signature, the transfer, the quiet shift of power. From me to them. I opened my eyes, looked around my kitchen, every detail in this house. I chose, every piece, I paid for, every wall, I maintained. No one gave me this life. I built it, slowly, deliberately, and I protected it, even from people I loved. Especially from people I loved. Because love doesn't protect assets. Discipline does. I reached for the folder again. This time, I opened it, not like before, not casually, properly, page by page, line by line, no rush, no assumptions. And the deeper I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just assistance. This wasn't shared responsibility. This was control, full control, financial authority, decision-making power, access to everything, irrevocable. That word was there, buried, but present, irrevocable. Once signed, there would be no going back. No correction, no reconsideration, just obedience to decisions that wouldn't be mine anymore. I closed the folder again. Slower this time, more carefully, and I nodded, not to them, to myself, because now I understood the situation completely. And once I understand something, I don't react, I act, quietly, precisely, without warning. I stood up, took the folder with me, walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, into my office, a room they rarely enter, a room I keep separate. for a reason. I placed the documents on my desk, turned on the lamp, sat down, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. Not because of what they did, because of what they didn't realize. They thought this was the end of a process. They thought they were one signature away from everything, but what they didn't understand was something I learned a long time ago. The moment someone tries to take control from you, without your consent, is the exact moment you stop playing defense and start changing the rules. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts, stopped at one name. I hadn't called him in years. Didn't need to, but I always kept the number. Just in case, because in business, you don't keep people close. You keep them available. My finger hovered for a second. Then I pressed call, and as the line started ringing, I realized something very clearly. They thought I didn't see it coming. But now, I was ready. He answered on the third ring. Daniel Brooks. Same voice. Calm, direct, unchanged. Daniel, it's Margaret Hale. A pause. Short, measured. Then, well, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. I need a review, I said. No small talk, no catching up. He understood that immediately. Of course you do, he replied. What kind? Control transfer. Full authority. Prepared without my counsel. Another pause. Longer this time. Who drafted it? He asked. I'll send it. Good, he said. And Margaret, don't sign anything. I almost smiled. I don't. I know, he said quietly. That's why I called him. Not because he's a lawyer. Because he remembers who I am. I'll have time tomorrow morning, he continued. Bring everything. I will. The call ended. Clean. Efficient. Exactly the way things should be. I placed the phone down. Looked at the folder again. And for the first time, I didn't see it as pressure. I saw it as information. A map. Of what they wanted. Of how far they were willing to go. And most importantly, of what they thought I wouldn't question. I opened my desk drawer. Took out a notepad. Not digital. Paper. I prefer it that way when things matter. You think clearer when you write by hand. I drew a simple line down the middle. On one side, I wrote, what they know. On the other, what they don't. I started with the first column. They know, my properties, most of them, my accounts, some of them, my routines, partially, my habits, enough to predict me. I paused, then moved to the second column. What they don't know, all secondary holdings, private agreements, offshore structures, and then, I stopped for a second. Because that list was longer, much longer, than the first. I sat back, looked at both columns, and nodded. That was their mistake. They thought they were stepping into control. But they were only stepping into what I allowed them to see. Nothing more. I closed the notepad, slowly, carefully. Then I stood up and walked to the window. The city was quiet, lights on, people living their lives, unaware of small shifts that change everything. I've always liked that. Big changes rarely look dramatic. They happen quietly, behind doors, across tables, inside conversations that seem normal. Until they aren't. I thought about my son. Not as a boy, not as my child, as a man who sat across from me tonight, and expected me to give up control. Because it was convenient, because it was smart, because someone told him, this is how things are done. And maybe, that's exactly what he believed. That's the part people misunderstand. Betrayal doesn't always feel like betrayal. To the person doing it, sometimes, it feels like logic, like progress, like entitlement that slowly became normal. And that made it worse. Because it meant, this wasn't emotional, this was calculated. I turned back to my desk. Opened the folder again, one more time. This time, I wasn't reading, I was studying. Names, signatures, firms, witnesses, every detail matters. People leave traces, always, and I wanted to see who else was involved, because things like this are never done alone. Halfway through, I found it, a name, not my son's, not hers, someone else, quietly placed, legal advisor, secondary, but present. I recognized it, not personally, but professionally, and that told me everything I needed. This wasn't just family, this was strategy, external advice, external planning, which meant they had already taken steps beyond what I had seen. Good, that made things clearer, because now, I wasn't dealing with emotion. I was dealing with structure. and structure can be dismantled. I closed the folder. Again. This time, for the last time tonight. I didn't feel tired. I felt focused, sharp, present, exactly the way I used to feel. Before closing a deal, that mattered. I turned off the lamp, left the office, walked down the hallway. The house felt different now. Not unsafe, just revealed, like I could finally see what had been building inside it. I paused in the kitchen. The same table, the same chair, everything looked the same, but it wasn't, because now I understood what tonight really was. Not a request, not a conversation, a test, and I had just failed. In their eyes, I didn't sign, I didn't agree, I delayed, and people who plan things like this don't like delays. They adjust, they push, they escalate. I knew that pattern. I've used it myself many times, which meant this wasn't over, not even close. I turned off the kitchen light, stood there in the dark for a second, and said, quietly, to no one but myself, good, because the moment someone shows you their full intention is the moment you stop guessing and start preparing, and by morning, I would be ready. I woke up before the alarm. That doesn't happen often, but when it does, I pay attention. The house was quiet, still, like nothing had changed, but I knew better. I made my coffee the same way I always do. Measured, precise. Routine matters, especially when everything else starts shifting. I didn't rush. That's the first mistake people make. They rush when pressure appears. They react. I don't. I sat at the kitchen table again. Same chair, same view, but this time, I wasn't being watched. I took a slow sip of coffee. Then I reached for my phone. No messages. Interesting. I expected something. A follow-up, a reminder, a push, but nothing, which meant one thing. They were waiting, confident, certain I would come around. That I just needed time. That I would convince myself. That's how people like this think. They don't see resistance as a decision. They see it as a phase. I set the phone down, finished my copy, then stood up and went to my office. The folder was exactly where I left it. Untouched. I like that. Nothing moves in my house unless I move it. I picked it up, placed it in my bag, along with a second folder. One they don't know exists. Never did, never will. I checked the time. Enough. I left the house without hesitation. No second thoughts. No hesitation at the door. Because once you decide to act, you don't pause. You move. The drive was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't need noise. I needed clarity, and I had it. By the time I pulled into Daniel's building, everything was already decided. Not emotionally, structurally. That's the difference. His office hadn't changed. Same glass doors, same receptionist, same controlled atmosphere. People like Daniel don't change environments. They build systems that last. Good morning, Mrs. Hale, the receptionist said. Good morning. No extra words. She already knew I was coming. I walked in. Daniel was standing by the window. He turned when I entered. Still sharp, still precise. Right on time, he said. I don't like delays. I remember. I placed the folder on his desk. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at me first. Carefully, measuring. Family? He asked. Yes. He nodded once. That told him everything. He opened the folder, started reading. No small talk, no distractions. Minutes passed. Silent, only the sound of paper turning. Then, he stopped, just for a second. That was enough. You see it, I said. Yes, he replied. He continued, slower now, more focused. When he finished, he closed the folder, gently. That's aggressive, he said. It's control, I corrected. He gave a slight nod. You're right. He leaned back, looked at me again. This wasn't drafted for discussion, he said. No, it was drafted for execution. Yes. Another pause. Then he asked the only question that mattered. What have you signed? Nothing. Good. That word was quiet, but firm. Then, he reached for his pen, opened his own notebook, and said, then we have options. Options. That's all I needed to hear. Because the moment you have options, you have control. And the moment you have control, you decide how this ends. I leaned forward slightly. Walk me through them. He did. Calm, structured, precise. Every path, every consequence, every outcome. No emotion, just facts. And as he spoke, something settled inside me. Not relief, certainty, because now, this wasn't about what they tried to do. This was about what I was going to do next. And that's a very different position. When he finished, he closed his notebook, looked at me one last time. They moved early, he said. Yes. They assumed you wouldn't respond. Yes. A small pause. Then, they're wrong. I allowed myself a small smile. Of course they are. And that's when I made the decision. Not out of anger, not out of pride, out of clarity. I don't want to stop them, I said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. No? No. I held his gaze. I want them to believe they're still in control. That changed the room, just slightly, but enough. Because now, this wasn't defense. This was strategy. And from that moment, everything shifted. Daniel didn't rush me. He never does. He just sat there, watching, waiting for me to finish thinking. That's why I trust him. He understands that decisions like this aren't made out loud. They settle, quietly. I'll need time to restructure, he said. How much? A few days to start. Longer to complete. That's fine. He nodded, then leaned forward slightly. If you want them to feel in control, he said, you'll need to act like nothing has changed. I almost smiled. I already do. He gave a short, approving nod. Yes, but now it matters. He was right. Before, it was habit. Now, it was strategy. I stood up, picked up my bag. Send me what I need to sign, I said. I will. And Daniel, he looked at me. No one else sees this. Of course not. That's the difference between professionals and family. Professionals understand boundaries. I left his office the same way I entered. Calm, measured, unnoticed. But everything was already moving. The drive back felt shorter. Not because of distance. Because my mind was clear. There's a point in every situation when uncertainty disappears. And once it does, you stop reacting. You start positioning. When I got home, the house felt different again. Not unfamiliar. Just quiet in a new way. Like it was waiting. I placed my bag on the chair. Walked into the kitchen. The same table. The same space. But now, Act 0, I saw it differently. This wasn't where they tried to take control. This was where they showed me how they think. And that's more valuable. I sat down, not because I needed to, because I wanted to remember the moment. Every detail, the tone, the silence, the expectation. People reveal everything when they think they've already won. I stayed there for a few minutes. Then I stood up and went back to my office. Opened my desk, took out 3 folders, old ones, untouched for years, not because they weren't important, because they were. Private structures, separate holdings, things I built quietly, while everyone else assumed they understood my life. I placed them on the desk. One by one, opened each, checked everything, still in place, still protected, still mine. Good, very good, because what they tried to take was only a portion, a visible portion, the part one allowed them to see. I closed the folders, stacked them neatly, then I made a short list. Simple, clear. Step 1, delay. Step 2, observe. Step 3, redirect. No emotion, no confrontation, just movement. Controlled, intentional. I heard my phone buzz in the other room. Right on time. I didn't rush to it. I never do. I walked, picked it up. My son, of course. I let it ring once more. Then answered. Hi, Mom. His voice was lighter, careful, measured. He was checking, testing. Good morning, I said. Did you have a chance to look at the documents? There it was, polite, but direct. I started, I replied. Pause. How does it look? I sat down slowly, gave myself a second. It's detailed, I said. That was enough. Not agreement, not rejection, just enough to keep him comfortable. That's good, he said quickly. We wanted everything to be clear. Of course you did. Clarity for control. I'll need some clarification on a few sections, I added. Another pause. Smaller this time. Like what? I'll go through it with you, I said. No need to rush. There it was again. Rush. He didn't like that word. I could hear it. Well, the sooner we finalize, the better, he said. Better for you. I understand, I replied. Calm, neutral, no resistance. And that's when it happened. The shift. Subtle, but real. Because in that moment, he relaxed. Just slightly. He thought I was moving toward agreement. That I just needed time. That everything was still on track. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. I'll call you later this week, I said. Okay, he replied. Sounds good. We ended the call. I placed the phone down and allowed myself a small, quiet breath. Not relief, confirmation, because now I knew they weren't suspicious. Not yet. They believed the process was working, that I was following their timeline. And that gave me something far more valuable than control. Time. And with time, you don't just protect what's yours. You reposition it, so when everything finally comes to light, it's already done, and they're the last ones to realize it. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, but I didn't mistake that for peace. Silence like that usually means one thing. Everyone thinks they're ahead. I followed my routine exactly. Morning coffee, short walk, a few calls, nothing unusual, nothing that could be noticed. Because when people are watching, you don't change your behavior. You refine it. Daniel sent the first set of documents that afternoon. Clean, precise, discreet, no obvious movement, but everything inside them shifted the foundation. Ownership paths, access limitations, authority layers, not visible to someone who isn't looking, but irreversible once complete. I reviewed everything myself, line by line, then signed. Not their documents, mine. That matters, always. By the second day, the first changes were already in motion. Quiet transfers, internal adjustments, nothing that triggers attention, nothing that raises questions. That's how you protect something real. You don't announce it, you reposition it. My son called again that evening. More relaxed this time. How's everything looking? He asked. Progress check. I'm going through it, I said. Still neutral, still open, still giving him exactly what he expects. That's good, he replied. Let me know if you need help. Help. I almost smiled. I will. Pause. Then, we're just trying to make things easier for you. There it was again. The same line. Rehearsed. Repeated. Believed. I know, I said. And that was enough for him. Because people don't listen to what you say. They listen for what confirms them. We ended the call quickly. He didn't push. Didn't need to. He thought time was on his side. That's the part that always interests me. Confidence. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just steady. The kind that comes from believing you've already secured the outcome. I've seen it before. Across tables. Across deals. Across people who didn't realize they were about to lose something they never actually had. By the third day, Daniel called. First phase is done, he said. Good. No delays. No visibility. Exactly what I expected. And the rest? I asked. In progress. Keep it that way. Always forward. Never rushed. That's how you stay in control. That evening, I sat in the living room. Lights low. House quiet. And I let myself think about something I hadn't allowed yet. Not the documents. Not the strategy. My son. I remembered him at 10. Standing in this same house. Holding a broken toy. Looking at me like I could fix anything. And I did. Every time. That's what mothers do. We fix. We provide. We protect. Until one day, they stop seeing you as the one who built things. And start seeing you as the one holding things they want. That shift. It's quiet. You don't hear it happen. You notice it later. In conversations. In tone. In moments like dinner tables with documents you didn't ask for. I didn't feel anger. That's the part people expect. But anger clouds judgment. I don't allow that. What I felt was distance. Clear. Defined. Necessary. Because once someone shows you how they see you, you adjust accordingly. Not emotionally. Structurally. I stood up. Walked back to my office. Opened the drawer again. Checked the folders. Everything in place. Everything moving. Exactly as planned. Good. Very good. Because by now, they were already too late. They just didn't know it yet. And that's the difference between reacting and preparing. They reacted to opportunity. I prepared for reality. My phone buzzed again. A message this time. From my daughter-in-law. We should all sit down this weekend and finalize everything. Finalize. I read it twice. Then set the phone down. No immediate response. That's important. People reveal more when you don't answer right away. A minute passed. Then another message. Just to make sure everything is handled properly. Handled. Controlled. Secured. For them. I picked up the phone. Typed slowly. We can meet. Sent. No more. No details. No agreement. Just enough. Because now, they were stepping into the final stage. The part where they expect closure. where everything comes together, where signatures happen, and control shifts. But what they didn't understand was something very simple. By the time people ask for final signatures, the real decisions have already been made. And in this case, those decisions were no longer theirs. Saturday came exactly as expected. On time, calm, controlled. I didn't change anything about my routine. That matters. When people are waiting for a decision, they watch for signals. I don't give signals. I make moves. I chose a simple outfit. Nothing formal, nothing casual, neutral. That's always the safest position. Neutral makes people underestimate you. I arrived 5 minutes early. My house, my table, my terms, they came together. Of course they did. That told me everything. This wasn't just a conversation. This was coordination. My son walked in first. Relaxed, confident. My daughter-in-law followed. Folder in hand. The same one, or at least, what they thought was the same. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Good morning." No hugs, no warmth. Not today. They sat down, exactly where they had been before. Interesting. People repeat positions when they think. The outcome will repeat too. She placed the folder on the table, opened it, turned it toward me, prepared, organized, certain. "We made a few small adjustments," she said. Adjustments. I didn't reach for it. Not immediately. I let the silence sit. Just long enough. Then I leaned forward, opened it, slowly. They watched. Of course they did. This was their moment. The final step. The part where everything becomes real. I turned the first page. Then the second. Then the third. Carefully. Not because I needed to. Because they needed to see it. To believe I was engaged. To feel progress. "That looks fine," I said. My son nodded quickly. Relief. Small, but visible. "And this section?" she asked, pointing. "Control clause. The core of everything." I paused, looked at it, then nodded once. "It's clear." That did it. That was the moment. They believed it. Not fully, but enough. Because people don't need certainty. They just need movement. My son leaned back slightly. Exhaled. "You see? It's just structure," he said. Structure. That word again. He needed to believe that. I closed the folder, placed my hand on top of it, and for a second, no one spoke. Then he said it. "So, we can sign today?" There it was. The question that wasn't really a question. I looked at him, calm, steady, the same way I've looked at people before closing deals my entire life. "Yes," I said, and the room shifted, not dramatically, but enough, because now, they thought it was done. My daughter-in-law reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, placed it in front of me, carefully, deliberately, like she had imagined this moment. Planned it, rehearsed it. I picked up the pen, felt the weight of it. Simple, black, ordinary. I've signed thousands of documents in my life. But this one was different, not because of what it was, because of what they thought it meant. I opened the folder again, turned to the first signature tab, placed the pen on the paper, and paused. Not long, just enough. People reveal everything in pauses. My son leaned forward slightly, waiting. My daughter-in-law held still, focused. This was it, the moment they had been building toward. And then, I signed. Smooth, clean, no hesitation. One page, then the next, then the next. Every marked place, exactly where they asked, exactly how they expected. When I finished, I closed the folder, placed the pen down, and looked at them. "It's done," I said. Silence. Then, relief. Real this time, not hidden, not controlled. My son smiled. "For the first time, that makes everything easier," he said. "Of course it does. For you." My daughter-in-law gathered the papers quickly. Too quickly. That told me everything. She didn't want space for questions, for second thoughts, for changes, but there were none. I had given them exactly what they wanted. Or at least, what they thought they wanted. We sat there for a moment. Nothing left to discuss, because in their minds, it was over, finished, resolved, control transferred. They stood up soon after. Satisfied, relaxed, grateful in a quiet, controlled way. "Thank you, Mom," my son said. I nodded. "You're welcome." And that was it. They left the house, lighter than they arrived, confident, certain, already thinking about what comes next. What they didn't realize was something very simple. By the time I signed those papers, nothing they thought they were gaining was still where they expected it to be, and the control they believed they had just secured had already been moved, somewhere they couldn't reach. They didn't call the next day. That told me everything. People only stay quiet like that when they believe the outcome is secure. No follow-up, no questions, no pressure, just confidence. I kept my routine, exactly the same: morning coffee, emails, a short walk, nothing unusual, because after a move like that, the most important thing is consistency. Around noon, my phone rang. My son, right on time. I let it ring once, then answered. "Hi, Mom." His voice was different, lighter, relaxed. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Feeling? Interesting choice." "Fine," I said. "Good," he replied quickly. "I just wanted to check in. Make sure everything went smoothly yesterday." Smoothly. I almost smiled. "It did," I said. Pause. "Then, we'll start organizing things this week," he added. "Just to get everything aligned." Aligned. That word again. Everything in its place. Under his control. "That makes sense," I replied. And I meant it. From his perspective, everything was exactly where it should be. "Do you have access to all the accounts?" he asked. There it was. The first real step. Not emotional, operational. I leaned back in my chair. Calm. "Yes," I said. Another small pause. "I mean, we'll need to transition that," he corrected. "Of course you will. In time," I said. Not resistance. Not agreement. Just enough to keep him moving. "That's fine," he replied. He didn't push. Didn't need to, because in his mind, the structure was already in place. The rest was just execution. We ended the call shortly after. He sounded satisfied, certain, already stepping into a role he believed was his. I placed the phone down and sat there for a moment. Still, quiet. Then, I stood up, walked to my office, closed the door behind me. Not because I needed privacy. Because I prefer it. I opened the drawer, took out Daniel's folder. Not theirs, mine. The real structure. The one that mattered. I reviewed it again. Every page, every clause, every adjustment. Still solid, still protected, still complete. Good, very good, because by now, the shift was already irreversible. What they had was access to something that no longer held power. What I had was everything that mattered, moved, protected, untouchable. I closed the folder, placed it back, and locked the drawer, not out of fear, out of habit. Control is built on habits, not moments. Later that afternoon, I received an email from my daughter-in-law. Subject line: next steps. I opened it. Short, structured, efficient. She always writes like that. "We'll begin reviewing the accounts and properties this week. Let us know a good time to go over details together." Together. I read it once, then again, and then I closed it. No reply, not yet, because timing matters, always. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself another cup of coffee, sat down, and allowed myself to think one step ahead. They were moving into execution. Access, review, control, or at least, what they believed was control. Which meant, very soon, they would start noticing small things at first: delays, missing links, structures that didn't behave the way they expected. And that's when the real shift begins. Not when you sign, not when you agree, when the other side realizes something doesn't add up. I took a slow sip and nodded to myself, because that moment was coming, and when it did, I would be ready, not to explain, not to argue, but to show them, very clearly, that control is not something you take. It's something you either have or you don't. And by the time they understand that, it's already too late. It didn't take long. 3 days. That's all it took. On the 4th morning, my phone rang earlier than usual. I already knew who it was. I answered. "Mom." His voice wasn't relaxed anymore. Not calm. Tight. "What's wrong?" I asked. Simple. Neutral. "There's an issue," he said. "Of course there is." "With what?" I replied. "The accounts," he said quickly. "Some of them aren't accessible. Some of them." I almost smiled. "I see," I said. Pause. "Longer this time. We tried to review everything," he continued, "but the structure is different." Different. That's one way to describe it. "How so?" I asked. "They're not where they should be," he said. "Some assets are missing from the overview." Missing? No. Just moved. I stood up slowly, walked toward the window, watched the street below. People moving, normal life. Have you checked everything? I asked. Yes, he said quickly. And Mom, there are restrictions on some accounts. Restrictions. He was starting to see it. Not fully, but enough. That's strange, I said. Calm, measured, controlled, silence. Then, when were these changes made? He asked. There it was, the real question. I turned slightly, looked at my reflection in the glass, and answered simply. Before I signed anything. Silence. Complete. Heavy. What do you mean? He said. I walked back to the table. Sat down. You wanted structure, I said. I made sure everything was properly structured. That's not what we agreed to, he replied. His voice sharper now. Controlled, but slipping. We didn't agree to anything, I said. That landed hard. We signed documents, he said. You did, I replied. Another pause. And then, realization, not full, but enough to shift the room on his side. You moved things, he said. Yes. Why? That question always comes. Why? As if intention changes outcome. As a precaution, I said. Against what? He asked. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't change my tone. Against losing control, I said. Silence again. Longer. He was thinking now, trying to catch up, trying to understand how something so certain became uncertain. That's not how this was supposed to work, he said quietly. No, it wasn't. For you. I reviewed everything carefully, I said. And I made decisions accordingly. You should have told us, he replied. Should have. Another interesting phrase. I wasn't asked, I said. That ended it, not the conversation, the argument, because there was nothing left to argue. Everything had already been done. Quietly, precisely, without interruption. I think we need to sit down, he said. Of course we do. We can, I replied. Calm, open, unbothered. When? He asked. Whenever you're ready, I said. Because now, timing wasn't theirs anymore. We ended the call shortly after. No resolution, no agreement, just a shift, a clear one, from confidence to uncertainty. I placed the phone down and sat there, still, not thinking, just observing, because this moment, this is where truth shows itself. Not when people believe they have control, when they realize they don't. Later that afternoon, they came, unannounced. That was new, that told me everything. I opened the door. They stood there, not relaxed anymore, not confident, focused, tense. We need to talk, my son said. I stepped aside. Come in. They walked in quickly, straight to the table. Same place, same chairs, but different people, because now, they weren't in control, and they knew it. I sat down across from them. Calm, composed, exactly the same as before. What did you do? My daughter-in-law asked. No softness now, no polite tone, just direct. I protected what's mine, I said. My son leaned forward. You transferred assets, he said. Yes. Without telling us. Yes. After signing legal documents. I held his gaze. Yes. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. That's not acceptable, he said. I almost smiled. Neither was what you brought to my table, I replied. That was it. The moment everything became clear. Not just to me, to them, because now, there were no misunderstandings, no confusion, no assumptions, just truth. They tried to take control. And I didn't let them. Not loudly, not emotionally, quietly, completely, and by the time they realized it, there was nothing left to take. They sat there, quiet, not because they had nothing to say, because for the first time, they didn't know what to say. I didn't rush it, I let the silence stay. That matters, because truth doesn't need noise. You should have trusted us, my son said finally. I looked at him, calm, steady. I did, I replied. Pause. And that's why I saw everything clearly. He looked away. My daughter-in-law didn't. She was still trying to calculate. Still trying to find a way back in. There has to be a way to fix this, she said. Fix. I almost shook my head. There's nothing broken, I said. Another silence. Then I stood up. Slowly. I didn't take anything from you, I added. I just didn't give you control. That was the difference. And they understood it, not emotionally, structurally, because now, there was nothing left to negotiate. They left shortly after, not angry, not loud, just different, like people who finally see the full picture, and don't like what it shows. The house was quiet again. But this time, it felt right, because everything was where it belonged. With me, where it had always been. And that's when I understood something simple. Control isn't taken in one moment. It's taken slowly, quietly, through small permissions you don't notice. Until it's too late. And respect? You don't ask for it. You show people what happens when it's missing. So tell me, would you have signed those papers? And what would you have done in my place? If this felt real to you, stay with me, because some lessons only come with time.
Your voice matters here. Share your story below. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Have you ever lived through something similar? Share in the comments. Your voice matters here.